Hello, I am Winston Springer, and with me is Professor Sir Roy Augier, Professor Emeritus from the University of the West Indies. Sir Roy has just been given or awarded the 4th highest order of Jamaica, the Order of Jamaica, or the Merit of Jamaica as it is called. How does one receive such an award or such acknowledgement?
Yes. Well, we have
welcome. I must say welcome first.
Yes,
and congratulations.
Yes,
and tell me about the Order of Jamaica.
And thank you. Yes, we have to distinguish between the OJ, Order of Jamaica, and OM, which is the Order of Merit. The Order of Merit is a higher order.
Okay.
The Order of Jamaica is usually for public service. In my case, since I continue to be a Jamaican national, I'm not a St Lucia national. I am not a Jamaican national. This order is given in the form of one who is foreign to Jamaica, right? So it's the order is conferred. It's not that it's not conferred. Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to write it formally, you write OJ, but one has to distinguish the conferment of the order. I will receive all the accoutrements in October when they're distributed.
But this is given to you for public service?
Public service in the University of the West Indies and public service in Jamaica in particular, because I've served on a number of public committees of the government and the Institute of Jamaica and in other ways. So the contribution to Caribbean history, to education, and to the public service to the government of Jamaica.
So Roy, you grew up in St Lucia in the 1930s. Most of your friends have passed. I know yesterday you were visiting your good friend Hunter J. Francois, former Minister of Education of St Lucia in the 1960s. You all grew up in the 30s in St Lucia. What was life like? What was growing up in St Lucia like in the 30s?
It's
before the war, that is.
Yes, it's difficult to...
Second World War.
It's difficult to sum up in any way that is accurate. I mean, it was, as an adolescent, one looks back more and more or less happy life. St Mary's College was a highly disciplined school at the time.
Located in the city of Castries.
Located, yes. Opposite
Miko Street.
Miko Street, opposite the convent, and where the girls went to school, girls of our age. And we lived diagonally across from the convent, and the college was 1 block away from us on Miko Street.
That's before the Second World War.
Oh, before.
And before the 1948 fire.
Oh, yes, yes. 1948 fire, I was at university in Scotland, in St Andrews, yes.
So you were with from St Lucia when this great fire passed?
Yes, yes. We had our own private fire at home. Our own home had burnt before I left St Lucia, yeah.
That was on Miko Street?
On Miko Street, on the corner, diagonally across from the convent.
Miko, yes. Also that place was rebuilt then?
Yes, it was rebuilt, yes.
Okay. The institutions of learning, what were they like in St Lucia then? I suppose it was the RC Boys?
Well, I went to the RC Boys, as it was called, the RC Boys Elementary School, and from there to St Mary's College. I was very lucky with my teachers because the headmaster of the, as it was called, elementary, we now say primary school, was Mr. Belizaire.
H.B. Belizaire?
Yes, and where this man got his knowledge, I don't know, because it never occurred to me then, because I was ignorant of, where did he learn to be a teacher, which college he went to. Later on, I found that the Micro College in Jamaica, students from the Eastern Caribbean, Antigua particularly, went there to do their teacher training. But it never occurred to me, well, I didn't know about Micro College at the time anyway. I only learned about that later on when I was doing my diploma in education at the Institute of Education in London.
Yeah.
But the distinction that this man had, I was able to appreciate because he wrote a geography of St Lucia.
That's right. I was just going to go to that.
Yes.
This is geography.
Yes, and so sometimes people quite wrongly think of these times as given an inferior education. We're not given an inferior education. No. I mean, in fact, the ambition was really exaggerated in a way. For instance, the book we used for English was Nettleship, and this was a book that you really for secondary schools, a guide to the use of written and spoken English, and we were using that in 6th standard.
Yeah, because I remember there is a geography, the world is round.
Yes.
If a ship approaching the horizon,
yes.
one of the first geography
Yes,
books
yes,
that
yes,
we at the time, and that was in the
Yes.
60s, you know.
Well, we continue to forget.
50s.
We
50s,
continue
that
to
is,
forget
the
that.
50s, yeah.
Although the world is round, we forget that we are really not up, but projected out in space. And that is why in the Belize geography, you are taught how when the ship is coming in, you see first the mast. Yes, because it's coming up. Yes, of course.
When did you leave St Lucia to further your studies, and how did you decide on a career path, the career path in academia?
Well, the truth about it is that I hardly can take credit for deciding that. From St Lucia, I joined the RAF, and from the RAF, I went to the University of St Andrews in Scotland. And the luck that I had was that the government of England, of the United Kingdom, had decided that all members of the armed forces, whichever Navy, Air Force, Army, who were accepted at any of the universities, would have the cost of the university paid by the government. You're provided with some money for books and some money for living. And the cost of attending the university was done. Now, how I got there is a longer story that I'm able to tell. But I was admitted to the Faculty of Arts.
That's at St Andrews?
At St Andrews, yes. But I wanted to do politics and law, and the dean explained that politics and law were not taught at the campus of St Andrews itself, the city of St Andrews, the university town, but at Dundee, which is an adjacent city where the faculties of medicine and law were situated. But he said you can do philosophy, and there's history of political thought here, and you can certainly do history. And I thought, oh, well, I'll do this degree in arts and specialize in history and moral philosophy. So that decided the matter. Later on, when I graduated, I was given a studentship, which is an amount of money to do a postgraduate degree. But the funds for that were calculated. It was a traditional scholarship, calculated as living in Scotland, and the cost of living was for Scotland. But the records for the Caribbean were in London. So I had to go down to London to work. And the professor, Macmillan, who had written a book about the West Indies and who was one of my professors, thought that the Colonial Office would be willing to subsidize, make up the additional money that was necessary for living in London. But the Colonial Office was not interested, they said to him, in providing money for a PhD, but they were only interested in providing teachers. And for them, the thing was, if they were going to do any subsidizing, it would be for a diploma in education at the Institute of London. So instead of beginning on my University of St Andrews postgraduate award, I spent my first year after graduation in London in the Institute of Education doing the diploma in education. And only in the second year did I begin doing my PhD research on on Jamaica.
Okay.
The money was insufficient because the colonial office, in the end, towards my third year, finally found some funds which came from some St Lucian whose name I've forgotten at the moment, but who had failed his exam a couple of times, and they had sent back home, and there were some funds left over. And
I can understand why you have forgotten that institution. When did you join the University of the West Indies?
In '54, when
54, when you had done your PhD.
I'd done my PhD
at St Andrews.
At St Andrews, yes.
And then came to the lure towards the University of the West Indies.
One had to find a job. I had an alternative. I could have gone to one of the new universities, which also coincided the same date with the University of the West Indies. But I said to myself, and this is what I really said, was if I have to go to the bush, I might as well go to my own bush. So I was given, I had the choice of an award as a research temporary lecturer for 3 years at the Institute of Social and Economic Studies. These institutes were set up in Nigeria and in East Africa, in Kenya. So I had a choice, and I chose the one at Mona, the Institute of Social and Economic.
So you could have gone out to Africa?
It was the alternative,
okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that's how I came. I didn't begin in the arts faculty or teaching history when I came to Mona. I was in the Institute of Social and Economic Studies.
Okay. Well, we'll take a break here and come back in just a moment with Professor Sir Roy Augier.
Hi, have you heard about biodiversity? Do you know what it means? It's more than just a variety of plants and animals. It's about the natural link that all life on this planet share, including you and me. So if you do anything to harm this natural link, you're actually harming yourself in the long run. When nature is abundant, so are we. Think about this natural link, because what is done to our biodiversity is done to us all.
Welcome back. I am Winston Springer, and with me is Professor Sir Roy Augier, Distinguished Professor Emeritus from the University of the West Indies, who has just been awarded the Merit of Order of Jamaica. Sir Roy, you have written extensively on the history of the Caribbean. One of your more popular books, or the most popular, is The Making of the West Indies. This was recommended text for those of us who did our GCEs in West Indian history back in the 60s. Take us through the process, the research, the writing, editing, the whole, scene,
yes,
production of this book.
Well, I have to modify your statement. My production of books has not been not to justify the word extensive, but the Making of the West Indies has a life. They continue to publish it, and I wonder why, because it was published in 1960, and I am the sole surviving of the 4 authors on the cover of the book. There's my colleague in the Department of History, Douglas Hall, and 2 teachers. One I knew from the Institute, Professor Shirley Gordon, and Professor Mary Turner. She was then not a professor, she was a teacher at Wilmer's. Wilmer's is a secondary school in Jamaica. So Shirley Gordon was a professor at the Institute of Education at Mona. Douglas Hall was a professor in the history department, and so was I. So these are the 4 authors of Making of the West Indies. We produced the book because Cambridge had asked me for advice on a new syllabus for, as it was then called, West Indian history.
West Indian history is what it's called.
Yes, history of the West Indies. So I had advised them to revise what they proposed to do, because there was not much West Indian history in it. It was really a collection of two parts of topics related to Europe and to what the Europeans did in the Caribbean Sea. So I said this was not a history of West Indies because there are no West Indian people's activities in it. Cambridge responded to my surprise with, well, why don't you help us by doing a syllabus and sending it to us, which I did. By that time, I was back in the Caribbean, back at Mona, or at Mona anyway. And the decision was when we consulted principals, and so if you all produce a textbook, we will teach the West Indian history. So we had to produce a textbook, and that was how it came to be produced.
Why did you not write on the history of St Lucia?
Well, regrettably, I feel that this is a regret that I have. One can't do everything. So it was always my intention. And as I went up the greasy pole, my teaching duties involved me more and more with teaching Caribbean history. And if you think of the times, the approach to federation that was going on, which was also one of the reasons for writing The Making of the West Indies, to put it in the schools. In fact, the title betrays that, because if you consider the making, of course, the making is pointing towards the federation, which seemed at that time to be certain to come into existence. And now we were putting, the book was published in the 1960s. Yeah. Federation came into existence in '62. So you can see where the title...
forward-looking.
Yes, the title comes from,
yeah.
Right? Then I got involved with UNESCO. The UNESCO, at the time, the Culture Division, decided to follow the history of Africa with several regional histories, and one of them was the history of the Caribbean. And I was asked to be the chair of the committee that would oversee the production of the history of the Caribbean. So St Lucia as an individual enterprise lost out because I got involved in providing this UNESCO history in 6 volumes of the history of the Caribbean, the UNESCO General History of the Caribbean, it is called. I think you have some copies of the history in the library, Carnegie Library in Castries.
Caribbean history, as it's now called, is optional in some schools in St Lucia and in the other parts of the Caribbean. Don't you think that we should make this compulsory, as it is our history, and that we should know first about ourselves before we, find out about others?
Well, I certainly think that schools should be organized to teach Caribbean history. In some schools it is not taught at all. I'm not sure about compulsory. None of the subjects that we provide for the schools for CSEC are compulsory as part of the provision. I mean, students have to do English and have to do maths, not because CXC says they are compulsory subjects, but because the next stage in their career, the seeking of work, if they are judged not to be competent by the fact that they don't have CSEC in English or in maths, they're not going to get much further. They might not even be able to get work. So history perhaps could be demanded by other institutions in the next stage from secondary school, Caribbean history in particular, and the students would then have to do it in the way they have to give preference to English and maths. Now, the problem that we have at the moment is that the number of students who are taking Caribbean history are declining. to compel them to take Caribbean history at CSEC at the present stage, unfortunately, is to expose them to some very questionable history teaching.
So, Sir Roy, how can we make West Indian history more attractive?
Well, that is the point that I was about to reach, because we have to concentrate on training competent teachers to make the subject attractive. If what happens is the teacher goes in and attempts simply to dictate to the students in the form of notes and so on, and the students are not encouraged to read and be curious and to ask questions, but the questions really arise from their own experience, because the history should have at its center the activities of Caribbean people. And that is what justifies us in saying, and my saying to Cambridge, what you are proposing is a history which emphasizes European activities, Renaissance, Reformation, Industrial Revolution, wars between France, Spain, and France and the Dutch. This is not Caribbean history. Caribbean history is about the activities of the people who lived on the borders of the Caribbean Sea, the Eastern Archipelago, the riverine coast of what we call Central America, from Belize right through to Panama, the northern end of the south of the continent, Colombia, Venezuela, the Guyanas stretching all the way down to the north of Brazil. This is one unit, a unit of slavery, a unit of Cain, a unit of wars for possessions by the Europeans, and a collection of peoples, some brought in under force majeure, others voluntarily coming in or induced, as the Indians and Chinese were at the latter part of the 19th century. That is the activity of people, it's the trade and commerce across the Caribbean, between the islands and the mainland. Across to the western side, as I said, the riverine areas of Belize and Nicaragua, Costa Rica. We have these populations in Costa Rica, in Nicaragua, in Colombia, and the northern end of Venezuela. So altogether, if you made clear to the students that you are discussing people, and of course before that you could start with the original inhabitants of these islands, the Taino and the Garifuna, and the others of the of the islands, you would then have a syllabus which is the students
more attractive to.
Yes, well, the syllabus is there. Is the teachers who don't convey it in this attractive way. So to answer your question in short, the clue really is for us to have teachers who present this as a live activity affecting our own times.
Why the lack of acknowledgement for Emancipation Day?
Well, this is a large question, and I'm not sure that I can answer it satisfactorily, but it relates to principally, I think,
lack of knowledge?
No, not lack of knowledge. An attitude which still, unfortunately, persists in the Caribbean of thinking of slavery as a shameful period in our life.
Okay. What are your other achievements? You've got the other merit for public service work that you have done in Jamaica and the other islands of the Caribbean. What are your other achievements apart from teaching?
Well, they're not so much achievements.
What have you done?
Well, yes, well,
what have you been involved in?
Yes, I've been
teaching.
I think the two words public service, which is also one of the reasons that the government of Jamaica gave me the Order of Jamaica. It is for education and history and public service, because I have been involved in from the beginning in work which went under the name of extramural in the early days of the university, and I've been appointed to various bodies like the Teacher Services Commission in Jamaica, University Council of Jamaica, the Institute of Jamaica. So I've been involved with these government bodies for a number of years, and in that way, also I might add broadcasting in its earliest forms. I did programs on Radio Jamaica and on the first television programs in Jamaica. So I don't know, I want to call these achievements. They've really been my interest in. I think there's a relationship between what is sometimes called town and campus, between the university and the surrounding environment in which it is. And I thought my teaching was the better for being involved in this.
Having done all of this in 2.5 minutes or so, all your life in academia, what's life like in retirement?
Well, I'm not.
Are you fishing? Are you traveling?
Well, I'm not retired. It's only that I don't teach undergraduates anymore. As Professor Emeritus, I'm involved with postgraduate students, and I'm still a member of the Teacher Services Commission. I'm the vice chair. I used to be the chair, and I'm on the University Council of Jamaica. So,
and no plans for retirement?
Well, whilst I'm alive, I have to try to be active. So
keeps the brain
well, it might.
active.
It might. I tell my friends when I start to mumble, just gently take me aside and sit me down.
Any plans for returning home?
St Lucia, no. Well,
Jamaica is more home now.
Well, that's where our children live.
Okay.
And so my family, of course, my brother's children, Adrian and Michael, my second brother's children, are here, his wife, and the extended generation of grandchildren. So I make a point of coming to St Lucia at least twice a year.
To see your friends, or good old friends like
yes,
Hunter and Branny and others of that vintage.
Yeah.
So Roy, it's been a pleasure having you. I wish that we could have spent a lot more time. Time is against us. The next time you come visit, we will do something a lot more extensive.
Yes, thank you.
On Caribbean history. It's really been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
I have been speaking to Professor Sir Roy Augier, Professor Emeritus of the University of the West Indies at St Lucia, who is home as often as he can afford it. We have been speaking about his latest achievement, the Order of Merit of Jamaica. My name is Winston Springer. Thank you for viewing, and goodbye.